The other day, Treyarch had put out a dev blog talking about some things to expect ahead of Season 1, a seasonal launch that we still don't know the date of for what it's worth, so it could have been something immediately introduced or something that's still maybe a few weeks away with these changes. They detailed things like Endgame being unlocked for all, weapon balancing, aim assist updates, spawn tunings, equipment buffs, and so on and so forth. Quite a few things listed had major implications for Black Ops 7's multiplayer experience, and to many surprise, it came not a few weeks later, but almost immediately. In-game, actually, as of now, this being recorded and published. The beauty of cycling through multiple games of coverage is I'm not the quickest on the draw with this one, but today we're taking a look at the newest changes you should be aware of in Black Ops 7's multiplayer experience. So drop your thoughts, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe to stay updated with all things Black Ops 7 and other FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community, but for now, let's get into it. First and foremost, the sort of like most unrelated thing to this update, but still something you should know about, is Double XP is going on right now for the weekend. Jump in, take advantage of it, save your XP tokens if you want to grind out the game, but also want more of an explicit reason to jump on it. Again, you do save those tokens, so it's nice that it just benefits you all around, but that's going on right now for the weekend. The biggest change, though, talking about the actual update itself, though, came out of the aim assist changes. Now, this is a somewhat controversial topic depending on who you ask. For me personally, I'm unbothered either way. I was okay with the tune that we had at launch. Took a bit more time to get used to, for sure, but that also could be just chalked up to me not playing on controller for what was almost 8 months straight, but also understanding that for the casual player who picks up the game once or twice a week, it may have been a bit drastic. But either way, Treyarch explained the change as, we intentionally took a big swing with our aim assist change between beta and launch. Now that we've had time to collect data and player feedback, we're making a slight adjustment as we do with all aspects of our gameplay over time to hit our targets and address the wide range of feedback. Black Ops 7 launched with a new right stick aiming requirement for achieving maximum rotational aim assist strength. When the right stick isn't used or isn't tracking a target effectively, players now experience a minimum rotational aim assist strength. At launch, the minimum rotational aim assist was 35% reduction from the beta. Our goal for this new mechanic and our other aim assist changes is to provide the most competitive experience for all players and inputs. This slightly overshot our balanced target, so we're making a small tuning adjustment to minimum rotational aim assist. Aim assist is one of the most integral components of gameplay feel, so it's crucial for us to settle on tuning that both feels great to play with and hits our balance goals. As always, we'll continue to closely examine the game data and player feedback. Then, they detailed that the minimum rotational aim assist penalty was reduced from 35% to just 25%. So as Treyarch mentioned, on paper it's kind of a nuanced change here. Not something that really restores aim assist to what it was previously, where you don't have to use that right thumbstick at all, but also likely to be somewhat noticeable of a change if you are somebody that does use the controller here, and it might be something you have to make those micro adjustments in your gameplay experience going forward here to make up for that or mitigate that. So would love to know your thoughts on this as we go along. But anyways, beyond that, the other big thing that was released with this update was that Endgame is now available for everyone who owns Black Ops 7. Honestly, I think that's a great change. I think the camo grind and weapon progression and everything like that has been so marketed with the co-op campaign element here of this, I think that was way too big of an aspect to have locked behind a campaign that is 4 to 5 hours long. And frankly, it's 4 to 5 hours that you might not necessarily care to do. So while I personally never saw this being locked forever, especially again with how much progression and how much was marketed of check out Endgame, you can do so much in here, it is just a little surprising that we did have it only a week later, that it was opened up to everybody. But that's something you can play around with now, some new content that may have otherwise been locked for you before this update. Now, the next part that was sort of integral to the gameplay experience was weapon tuning. We ended up seeing a couple of weapons across the weapon classifications being changed, so let's dive into that. Rifles, it said that rifles are receiving a small flinch nerf so that they flinch harder than the SMGs. This isn't a huge adjustment, but they also don't want to introduce lucky headshots into full auto gunfights, so the flinch increase is small enough that it may affect players aiming for headshots and not well centered, but still not force most torso shots into headshots unintentionally. But individual weapons, the M15 Mod 0 saw a slight damage nerf with the exception of a range increase at its maximum damage range, but then saw nerfs all around to sprint to fire, attack sprint to fire, movement, crouch movement, and sprinting movement speed, along with ADS movement speed, and an increase to the first shot vertical recoil and view kick strength. The AK-27, they said they wanted to have handling and mobility penalties pushed further and introduce a bit more initial vertical recoil before it clamps, where then the damage range adjustments also reduce some of that mid-range headshot potential, but introduce additional damage fall-off at range so that the AK-27 is weaker against marksmen, LMGs, and snipers at a distance. So you saw that damage drop at the medium damage range while slightly increasing the range, and also the minimum damage range at further distances was also decreased in damages. The sprint to fire, tactical sprint to fire, slide to fire, and movement speeds were all nerfed, while we ended up also seeing an increase to that first shot recoil and slight increase to the maximum vertical recoil climb. The MXR-17 saw nerfs to this weapon, but a lot less done to it. You only saw a nerf to the slide to fire timing and the ADS movement speed. The X9 Maverick, they said they were adjusting the max damage and body multipliers so that hitting at least one shot to the head, neck, and upper torso or upper arms is required for a one burst at shorter ranges. But they're also dropping the handling from above average for the class to be a bit more average, since the weapon itself is actually performing quite well. So the damage at the maximum range was dropped, but then you also saw those additional adjustments made to bring it in line with their targets. And the DS-20 Mirage saw nerfs to, again, not so much, but a nerf across the board for the weapon, where you saw sprint to fire and tactical sprint to fire times increased, while the ADS movement speed was reduced, making it slower and a longer draw time on those weapons. SMGs, they tried to buff these a little bit here and make them a bit more competitive in nature across the various different classifications of weapons they may go up against. So starting with the Raiden 45K, we saw a medium damage range increase, but additional adjustments that really kind of stand out comparatively of ADS speed improvements and slight reductions in gun kick deviation and that view kick strength. So making it easier to control when being shot at and getting that draw time a little faster. They also had various adjustments to specific attachments, but those will only be affecting your builds if you end up using those. The RK9, we saw a medium damage range increase once again with a few adjustments to buff certain attachments. The Razor 9mm, we saw that medium damage range increase once again, along with a various number of attachments, but also slight reductions in that gun kick strength and view kick strength as well. So a buff all around to this weapon. The Dravik 45, you guessed it, medium damage range 2 saw an increase there. The Carbon 57 saw that same damage range increase, along with a slight reduction in the view kick strength and deviation, plus a few attachment adjustments. And finally, the MPC 25 saw, again, you guessed it, that medium damage range 2, that range increased, along with improvements to the slide to fire, dive to fire, and aim down sight times, along with reductions in gun kick deviation and view kick strength, and a few attachments. Marksman rifles, they said they wanted to make sure there's still some counterplay for these weapons, so while they're in a good place for their damage properties and stuff like that, they're upping the flinch they receive and hitting the handling and mobility of the weapon, so they're accounting for a little bit more balance in that regard. So the Warden 308 was adjusted in that capacity, where the upper arm multipliers were removed, the sprint to fire, tactical sprint to fire, and aim down sight times were increased, making those slower, while the movement speed was reduced, ADS movement speed was reduced, and the flinch was increased. So hitting those mobility, but again, offering a bit more in relation to that flinch that you may notice. The Nova line saw an increase to the sprint to fire, tac to sprint to fire, slide to fire, and dive to fire times, making that slower, movement speeds reduced, and the aim down sight times increased, again, slower all around, while also increasing flinch. The LMGs, the MK7.8, saw an improvement to the ADS time, and some adjustments to mitigate some of the frustrations with the Prestige attachment that MFS heat shield belt fed. The XM325 again saw an improvement to that aim down sight, making it a little bit faster on the draw. And then finally, your pistols, your Jaeger 45 with the Prestige attachment barrel, you end up having the damage basically doubled on that thing, going from a 31 to a 60 in its maximum damage range. And finally, the Velox saw a slight nerf to its maximum damage range damage, so up close and personal, it's going to do 1 damage less, meaning you're going to have to land 1 more shot to kill. Additional changes of note that were made: your visible minimap is increased by an additional 10% on top of a previous 15% increase to the area shown on the minimap. Your drone pod was adjusted, where it increased the drone pod charge time to 3 minutes, up from 2.5. It reduced the drone pod duration for each active drone to only 8 seconds, down from 10, and it reduced the damage for each of the drone pods down from 60 to 50. One change that I'm a big fan of is that they did change the kill enemies affected by your tactical equipment, that camo challenge associated with so many different weapons. to kill enemies affected by your tactical or non-lethal score streak. So that means if you have a UAV or a counter UAV up, or like a harp, that's something that in theory should also count for that as well, making that challenge a lot easier to obtain. Zombies, we saw a reduction in the difficulty for the boss fight in Ashes of the Damned. Full transparency, have not been able to play a whole ton of zombies and certainly have not tried the Easter egg out just yet, but I've seen so many clips of that boss fight being ridiculous. So seeing that it has been reduced in that difficulty, making it more accessible to players, is something that I definitely think is nice as well. But overall, that is the gist of what you end up getting out of this update for pre-Season 1, but we still have a couple of things here that were mentioned explicitly in that dev talk that have not yet made it to the game, so likely coming in Season 1. Spawns, they said they have a targeted update for this for Season 1, where they're changing spawns in Hardpoint, Free-For-All, and TDM. Hardpoint is very noticeably bad, I think. Perhaps I think some of the worst Hardpoint spawns I can recall in recent memory, especially in Hardcore, because that's one of those things that, of course, you can die in one bullet. And so if somebody ends up getting the jump on it and they can predict that spawn, they can sometimes even look into that spawn, or you'll just have people spawn directly behind you. Whatever the case, there were just so many situations that, especially in Hardcore, Hardpoint, where I was grinding camos, it was brutal. So looking forward to seeing those changes coming. We'll see further equipment for the point turret, needle drone, Molotov, and cluster grenade equipments, among a few other things coming. But again, we don't have any ETA just yet on when Season 1 will in fact launch. But that said, that is the update and what we saw change with Black Ops 7 and what is still yet on the horizon for future changes in Black Ops 7. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you guys think of these updates? Do you like all that we saw so far with the aim assist adjustments, Endgame being something that's now freely accessible if you have Black Ops 7? Do you like the weapon tuning? Let me know. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. Of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 7 and all things FPS, like Battlefield 6, Red Sec, Arc Raiders, and even more. I'd love to have you in the community, but for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.